Stephen Orrit, the director of My Name is Sara. Hi, Stephen.
How you doing, Ken?
Good. So how are things in California right now? Coronavirus and fires and all of this.
Outside my door, pretty good. We've managed to avoid the fires, but yeah, coronavirus is off the charts everywhere, but it's definitely on the rise out here. But we don't leave the house much like everybody else. So, this is our little sanctuary here.
I understand.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say this movie, My Name is Sara, was very, very powerful. And I was trying to find the words to describe it because it really just stays with you for a while. There's a lot in there to process. And one of the things I found interesting was the story about how the real Sara, when I was reading about this, she was pretty reluctant to share much of her actual history with her family. I was wondering if, can you talk about that? Is there what her reasoning was, why she was so reluctant to talk about this?
Sure. So Sara was suffering from PTSD greatly because of her experiences. I first interviewed her about 4.5 years ago, and by the time I interviewed her, she was having a lot of difficulty, not only to PTSD but also to dementia. But from what her family has shared with me, that she was affected by her experience during the war greatly throughout her adult years, and just very, had no desire to recount it, to relive it, had no desire ever to return to Europe again. And because of that, I think she suppressed a lot of her memories, which is understandable, and therefore it wasn't something that she actively, even spoke about with her family. It wasn't until much later in life that she started to even reveal some of the details of her experience, and she actually, in some ways, had an easier time communicating with her grandchildren than she did with her own children. Mickey Shapiro, Sara's son, who's one of the producers on the film, when he talks about Sara as a mother when he was young, she was very shut down, and he speaks about his father Asa was really his access for emotion and compassion and softness, simply because I think Sara was just so hardened from her experience. And
so I'm sorry. So
I was going to say, this is typical from a lot of survivors' experiences, from what I've understood.
Right. So how does she get from that to actually pretty much detailing her story later on, as I understand?
Well, it wasn't her choice to detail her story, and I should say that Sara passed away a little over 2 years ago, and she was actually unaware that there was a film even made about her life, and that really was the decision of her son Mickey and the rest of the family. Mickey felt as though it would be too painful for her to relive it, having to see the film. And even when I interviewed her, she did not know that I was a filmmaker interviewing her with the hopes of making the film. She thought I was an attorney and was just asking her questions, and that's how Mickey wanted to keep it. So I respected that. So it wasn't as though she suddenly, in her 80s, was like, I'm ready to tell my story, let's make a movie. In fact, it kind of happened very circuitously. My partner in my production company is affiliated with the USC Shoah Foundation. He sits on the board of the USC Shoah Foundation, and sits on the board with a man named Mickey Shapiro, and Mickey's mother is Sara. And so through this kind of connection, our friendship, the three of us we manufactured the telling of Sarah's story in the film.
I know with films and writing the screenplay, there's, you have to be creative and focusing on certain areas and maybe leaving some other areas out. How close do you think the screenplay and the film came to telling her actual experiences within reason?
I think it came very close. If you had to put a percentage on it, I would say the film is, I would say 90% factual.
That's a lot.
It was. When I first saw Sarah's testimony that she had given to the United States Holocaust Museum and the USC Shoah Foundation, they're two living testimonies that anybody can go and access via YouTube. If you just put in Sara Shapiro or Sara Goralnik Shapiro, you can see her testimonies, and they're both about an hour and a half long. And when I watched both of them, I was just, my jaw was on the floor. I was instantly drawn to the story because what she was recounting had an arc already, and was really fully formed story, but it was just so nuanced, and her experience was not at all, didn't have to deal at all with the camps. Sarah was in hiding in eastern Poland, or what became Ukraine, on a farm, and that farm was very much an island in the middle of the war. Much of the greater war didn't visit the farm, and so Sarah was able to exist there for a few years. And I just found that to be really fascinating, a fascinating look at a Holocaust story. Again, kind of focusing more on the mundane, and how every day this young girl had to just kind of methodically go through these motions of working on this farm and being a nanny to these young two boys. So we didn't have to manufacture too much in terms of the story because the story was complete. But when I first met Sara, the first question I asked her was, how does a young girl, 12, 13, 14 years old, survive such an experience? Because it's really unfathomable to me. And she said, immediately by listening and not talking. And it crystallized for me at that moment kind of who this character was, this very sort of robotic person who, like I said, was just going through these machinations of her daily existence just to survive. And she was trying to just blend in and keep as much of a low profile as possible, and was understandably a passive character. But when you're writing a story or telling a story on film or in a book or a television series, it's hard to hang a story on a passive character. It's much easier to hang a story on an active character, somebody who's going after things and creating the action, as opposed to a result of all the actions happening around her. So because of that, we invented a few characters that kind of either pushed the story forward at moments where Sara couldn't, in order to stay true to the true story, or created some characters to sort of provide an emotional window, if you will, to what Sara was going through, because again, she couldn't reveal the truth and what was really happening on the inside. Right. So for like I said, for the most part, what you see on the film is what really transpired. But there are a few characters that we invented, and I'm happy to get into any specifics if you want. But on a general level, that was.
No, how we approached it. Right. When I was watching it, I heard, if I heard right, I heard some Polish and some German. I don't know if I'm imagining that I heard some Russian, or if I actually heard some Russian being spoken as well.
You did.
Right. But of course, it's mostly in English. And I was wondering if you could say what led to the decision to film the bulk of the film in English.
Sure. Yeah. So you're right. It starts in Polish because Sara was a Polish Jew. She lived on the border, eastern Poland, which was then the border between Poland and Soviet Union, and Sarah, she spoke Yiddish and Hebrew in the home, but she also she went to a Ukrainian school, so she spoke Ukrainian, and she spoke Polish and Russian. And she was able to vacillate, between those languages in order to survive, which was, key to her survival. But when we started making the film, we knew that the film was made primarily for an American audience. And while the bulk of her survival story takes place in Ukraine, she spoke Ukrainian through that. And we made a decision early on that we were not going to be making a Ukrainian language film. So she's speaking English in the bulk of the film as though it were Ukrainian. And yeah, that was the real motivation was again, so that we could make the film really available and accessible to an American audience. But also a factor that led to that decision was that I don't speak Ukrainian. This was my first feature film. Our lead actress, Zuzana Saraway, she didn't speak Ukrainian, and this was her first feature film. And I just didn't want to stack the deck, too far against me. And I felt as though by making it a Ukrainian language film, it would have been that much more difficult to pull off. So those were the contributing factors to that decision.
That actually makes a lot of sense in terms of how to kind of take in the film. Actually, less confusing than when everything is in English and you don't understand that they're switching back and forth between languages. I find that actually a little more confusing at times.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of ways you can go about it, and it seems like every film of that era kind of has a different approach. I obviously tried to watch anything and everything, as much Holocaust content as I could, both narrative and nonfiction. Once we made that decision to go with English as though it was Ukrainian, all of the other languages we preserved and have. It was important for us to have native speakers, so that the Germans are German, speaking German. The Russians are Russian actors that we flew in from Russia to Poland, speaking Russian, and the main actors are all Polish. Most of them did not know English even before doing this, so they learned English to speak English, and to speak English as though it was Ukrainian. But I know that that's a little of a hard thing to kind of stomach for some of the Polish audience, because they see Polish actors that they know well playing Ukrainians speaking English. So that's a little tough for them. But here in the States, I think we were hoping that that sort of broken English Eastern European accent would kind of translate to as though this is not Ukrainian, but this is not English, but it's sort of a hybrid of the two.
So how was the communication? I'm just curious, how was the communication for you with the crew, with the actors? Do you speak a little Polish? Did most of them speak English? How did that work out for you guys?
Communication was very easy. Everybody over there under the age of 40 speaks English. So, it's very easy to communicate over there. I started listening to Polish lessons before I left, so I knew a little bit. I like to say that, around a dinner table or a film set, I can understand Polish. I do pretty well, but if you take me out of those two environments, I'm dead in the water. Right. But I had a translator by my side, every step of the way, who, whenever I ran into any issues, she obviously could, help there. But it was a little difficult in that, anytime you're on a film set, the clock is ticking, and that just time is money. And so anything that slows you down or is an impediment to moving forward in your kind of shooting schedule throughout the day, at least in me, creates anxiety. And so, I at times, where it might have saved a few minutes by being able to speak directly in English, having to kind of sometimes go through one or two translators, depending upon who the actor was that I was speaking with. It may have slowed things down a little bit, but I believe fervently in the rehearsal process, and we had a very long rehearsal period in Warsaw prior to we started shooting. And the actors over there, all of the Polish actors come from not all, but a majority of the Polish actors come from a strong theater background, and appreciate the rehearsal process. So we spent months rehearsing before we even stepped on the set. So a lot of those conversations that happened on the set were a lot easier because we had been so well prepared rehearsing for it.
One of the things that really struck me about the film is it's not really told in a sentimental way. It's not even really told in kind of a judgmental way, even though some of these characters are not being particularly nice to Sarah. You don't get the sense that other than the German soldiers, you don't really get the sense that you view them as the bad guys. You just view them as people that are just trying to survive. And I was wondering, is that how it felt for you? Was that a decision you made? How did you arrive at kind of that way of telling the story?
Well, first I say thank you for pointing that out, or picking up on that, or calling that out. Because yeah, that was very, very important to me from the outset of making the film. First with my two producing partners on it, Andy and Mickey. It was something that we discussed, that we did not want to make an overly melodramatic, sentimental film. And then when we brought on David Himmelstein, our screenwriter, again, that was some of our earliest conversations where we don't need to make it overly sentimental, because the story, on its face, is so powerful as it is. But so that was something that was always in the back of my mind when we were making the film. When I first got over to Poland and we started really, the pre-production process, and I started meeting with some of our heads of the different departments, or even before hiring some of them, we would send the script. My producing partner in Poland would, say, these are the 5 cinematographers who I think, you would really benefit from working with over here. And I would look at all of their work, and then, would send, maybe say 3 of them the script, and start having meetings with them, kind of talking about, their impressions of the script. And I always heard from everybody that I spoke with the same response. Was, when I got the script, it's not at all what I expected to read. And I think, the fact that I'm a Jewish American, and that they maybe, they knew that this is a story that is being made by Americans, and written by a Jewish American, directed by a Jewish American, that they anticipated that it would be more sentimental and not as nuanced. And painting with a broad stroke, I think European film is much more nuanced and subtle. And that was the impression that most of the people that I met with early on had, that that the script was left so much room for interpretation and kind of the gray area, if you will. And when I heard that from people, as though when I heard it from you, it's something that I take a lot of pride in, because one of the things that really sort of bothers me when people do talk about the war, or any war, or kind of, reflecting back on what they would do, or how they would have done it, or I would have made this decision, or, you hear people say things, that are just outlandish. And the truth is that none of us know how we would react, because we're not in that position. Unfortunately, we never have to be put in that position. And so I always looked at every character that we had in the film, through that lens, and really, again, was just attracted to the story, because it's really, it's a human story. And I like to say that it really focuses on more of the collateral damage of the Holocaust than necessarily like the barbaric acts of the Holocaust, or the greater forces behind the Holocaust, and it looks at it really on more of a granular, mundane level, which isn't for everyone, but I appreciate that, you know, that resonated with you, and certainly was something that I was very conscious of when making the film.
You know, when you're talking about the difference between American films and European films and that kind of nuance, you reminded me, I'd forgotten this, the first time I watched the film, because I try to watch everything cold. I don't know what I'm watching until I start watching it. Mm-hmm. I remember thinking, why did these Europeans make this film in English? Because it felt like a European film. It didn't feel like a film made by an
Thank you. My fellow filmmakers on the, you know, collaborators on the film would be very, very proud to hear that, very much so.
You know, another thing I liked about it is I felt like it, in a strange way, really, Sarah's character, like you said, it's almost, I don't know if robotic is the word, but the whole thing is an act. Most of the time you see her, she's pretending to be someone and something she is not. And she kind of achieves that by just hiding everything and kind of closing down everything. And so, yeah, how do you identify with that person? Somehow the fact that it was unsentimental, to me, almost forced us into her perspective, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm stating that right.
I think that tracks for me. You know, Sarah was very unsentimental, and when she spoke about her experience, it was very just, you know, black and white, no emotion, and not only, you know, I interviewed her 3 times. As I mentioned, I had, you know, the 2 testimonies that she gave as resources. Obviously, though, had her son Mickey as a big resource, and then the executive director of the USC Shoah Foundation, a man named Stephen Smith, who did her testimony with the USC Shoah Foundation, took it. Also knew her well and had a lot of you know, personal, private conversations with her that she didn't share with the camera necessarily, but that these are things that, you know, that he shared with me and the filmmaker, my fellow filmmakers when making the film, because he felt as though they were important aspects to have in the film. And again, you know, these are things that Sara just mentioned matter of fact. And so I felt as though there was no need to kind of, you know, embellish them when they were in the film. I tried to portray them as though she was kind of there, you know, explaining, telling the story, if you will, even though we're, you know, seeing it through her eyes.
Now tell us about your lead actress, how you found her, how she's the one you wound up casting. She did a very interesting job.
Yeah, so her name is Zuzana Saraway. She is 18 years old now, and she lives in southern Poland in Silesia. And we started casting in December of 17, and first saw every professional actress within the age of, I think, you know, 10 and 16 in Eastern Europe, and nobody fit the bill in my opinion. And so the casting director and I, a woman named Nadia Levick, came up with an idea to do an open casting call in Poland. And she went to 6 cities in Poland and, you know, put up flyers and took out ads and, you know, small publications, and saw about 650 girls, and then sent me links to about 175 of those 650. And of those 175, I narrowed it down to probably 45 that I then saw in person over in Warsaw. And those 45, I then narrowed it down to 2 young women. And Zuzana was one of them. Another one was another incredible young actress named Natalia. And we stuck both of them in English class and acting class for about 6 weeks. And then I took both of them to Auschwitz and arranged for them to get a Polish language tour of Auschwitz. And while the story doesn't deal at all with Auschwitz or the camps whatsoever, neither of them had been there yet and experienced it. And I felt as though it would be um, helpful for them to be able to pull on that emotionally when doing their performance. And so we then, like I said, gave them about 6 weeks of training, and then I returned to Warsaw. And at that time, we had cast the two lead adult actors for the Nadia and Pavlo roles, and then inserted Natalia and Zuzana with them, and did screen tests and castings with them for a whole full weekend, and just put them through the ringer. And then ultimately decided on Zuzana. And she had never acted before. She had never even taken a drama class. She's an athlete, more so than she is an actor. But when I learned that she was an athlete, I was even more certain that she was the right choice, because in my experience working with actors that come from an athletic background, they really, they understand training and discipline, and the film was going to call for somebody who went through a lot of, physically demanding scenes and work. And then I met her family, her parents. And while I wasn't auditioning her parents, I definitely was interested in getting their opinions on their daughter's pursuit, of this role. And it was important for me that they were supportive of everything that she was doing, because it was, she was going to embark on a very, very challenging year ahead. And they were wonderful people and so supportive of her endeavor to do this. And we made that choice. And I just, I think she just did such a wonderful job. I'm so proud of her as an actress, and more so as a young woman. She's just so incredible, and has done a number of Q&As with me when we were traveling internationally doing film festivals before the pandemic. Zuzana was with me on a number of them, and just is such a wonderful ambassador and a wonderful bridge between Poland and the United States, and speaks so eloquently, and really just understood the gravitas of the role and the responsibility of the role. And I give her all the credit in the world.
I imagine there were some moments when you were making this film, either related to certain scenes or just in putting the whole thing together, where it must have been difficult. You must have questioned, am I doing the right thing? Can I do this? I was wondering if you could address that a little bit.
Sorry, I'm not laughing. You're so spot on, and very, very astute. The memory that comes to mind. So that scene takes place in the square of the village that Sara was hiding in, and we didn't shoot the film in Ukraine. We shot the film in Poland, in Eastern Poland, in the only region in Poland that's actually Orthodox Christian. The rest of the country is Roman Catholic. So we chose it because it had Orthodox Christian churches, and it also is the most precipitous region and coldest region, one of the most coldest regions of Poland, and is flat and resembles Ukraine. So that's why we shot there. But I say that because the village that we shot in was a Polish town. And the big building that is the back of the square, this big white building that has these two large swastika banners on it, is a temple, and was for hundreds of years, and pre-war, and then obviously was not functioning during the war, but now is a temple, and is a bit of a museum as well. And the day before we filmed that scene, the crew, we went and did a tech scout, which is basically like an advanced, a day in advance. You kind of go there with all of the heads of the departments and talk through the scene, and make sure that everything is as we had planned it to be before stepping on the set the next day. And I remember I got out of the van and I walked into the square, and I look up and I see these two huge swastika banners on this temple, and I'm like, I had that thought, like what you just said. I was like, shit, am I crazy? Am I desecrating this? Those two banners are up there because, like I said, yeah, let's put two large banners up there. And I got a little, I froze for a second, and our incredibly talented and wonderful production designer, a man named Marek Zawarucha, who's just like, I love this guy so much. He built all of our sets, and he saw me and he saw that I was just kind of frozen. He came up and he put his arm around me and he's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? You know, what did I do? You know, and I said, no, you didn't do anything. It's, you know, it's incredible. It looks so, it's just unbelievable. But should we take those swastikas down? You know, is it bad? Is it in poor taste? He's like, in poor taste? What are you talking about? We're making a Holocaust film here. Like, he said, no. We, you know, it's not. We need to keep those up there because, you know, it's important for people to see what happened, what the reality was. And that was you know, a moment for me where I stepped out of it for a second. But for the most part, you know, I really tried to stay in the moment and trust my instincts and trust the fact that I was supported by such, you know, an incredible team of artists that I just had hoped that you know, all of our work would result in ultimately what it did. But you know, because the filmmaking process is so difficult and it's so chaotic. Yeah, I really just tried to stay in the moment as much as possible, because it's really not, it's a poor use of your time if you're, you know, living in the past, regretting what you shot wrong the day before, or too anxious, worried about what you're going to shoot the day ahead. It's really, you know, for me, I found that was most effective when I was in the moment, you know, working on the scene on the day that we're working on it.
Well, you know, this is our closing film for our festival. We're so fortunate that we're one of the festivals that get to show it, even if it's through a virtual festival this year, unfortunately. But fortunately for us, we do get to show it. And I thank you so much for your time. And I wish the best for you and your family. And I hope you stay warm there in California.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. And yeah, thank you so much for having us. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be doing these festivals and speaking about the film and speaking with you today. So thanks so much for having us.